Good evening and welcome to the May 28, 2005 meeting of the Minnetonka Economic Development Advisory Commission. The schedule and tentative agendas can be obtained by calling the City Community Development Department or by checking the city's website at minnetonkamn.gov. Copies of tonight's agenda and staff reports are on the podium outside of these chambers. This meeting is televised and web streamed on the city's website. Listening devices are available upon request. If you wish to use a device, please see city staff located outside the council chambers in the audio-visual control room. The Economic Development Advisory Commission advises the City Council regarding economic development, housing, and redevelopment matters. From a broader standpoint, the EDAC attempts to find a balance between individual rights and community responsibilities as they make their recommendations. Individual rights are easy to understand. Community responsibilities are more subtle, but the idea is that we, as members of the community, agree to limit our individual rights for the common good of the group. The Community Development Department, the Economic Development Advisory Commission, and the City Council are responsible for managing this sometimes difficult balancing act. We ask that you keep this broader perspective in mind as we review tonight's subject matter. Before we begin, please make sure to turn off your cell phones. I'm going to do mine right now. Tonight's agenda, we have two agenda items that are they are recommendations for the council. The first is March 3 financing request. And I see somebody from Ellers here to help us with that. And the 2026-2030 Economic Improvement Program, which we went through last time, but as you know, this is a very involved, probably the most involved thing that we go through. So I expect that will take a little bit of time. With that, I think the first thing I would ask is for a motion for approval of tonight's agenda.
Roll call?
I don't know that we need roll call for that, do we?
Or roll call first?
Oh yes, roll call first. I'm sorry. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, let's do roll call.
Anderson?
Here.
Connors? Here. Duginski, Sabolka?
Here.
Falk?
Here.
Haig?
Here.
Jin?
Here.
And Ramatka?
Here. Okay, thank you. Now let's approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. I think it's in front of all of us. Have a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you. Second?
I second.
All right. Any comments on the agenda? Hearing none?
No.
All those in favor of approving the agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Agenda was approved unanimously. The minutes from the March 20th meeting, do we now have a sufficient quorum to approve those?
Chair, I believe we do. I indicated on the slide everyone that was present that day, so it looks like we have a good a quorum on the minutes.
Wonderful, thank you. If everyone has had an opportunity to review those minutes from the March 2025 EDAC meeting, I'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. A motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none. Motion passes unanimously. So we're to item number 5 now, moving along quickly, but we will slow down, I'm sure of that. The business items are our two action items this evening. First is the March 3 financing request. So from that standpoint, staff?
Thank you, Chair. And then I'll go into this.
Sure. Alicia's just asked me to kind of recap the previous two projects, and it's mostly for people maybe who weren't here during that time frame. So if you look to the east side of the map on the bottom or the right side of that, if you can help me point, that would be great. I think that's on, yeah. So that's the Burke. That was the first project that was built in this area. Probably, if you want to call that Marsh Run 1, that would be great. And then right to the west of where this property is, yeah, that's a better area. You can see it under construction now. That's called Marsh Run 2. That's done by Doran as well. So those two projects were Doran. The new project that you're looking at tonight is actually Marsh Run 3, which sits in between, again, that previous office building complex that's there today would be replaced by this project. Inland Partners is actually the applicant. They're a separate development company. Doran is involved in different aspects of the project, but the front developer is called Inland Partners. We do have a representative of the ownership here tonight. His name is Tom Dillon. With that intro, hopefully that helps kind of get to the heart of the matter where we're dealing with tonight. So,
Yeah.
Alicia.
Julie, can you just, I had a question that I had notes on from the standpoint of kind of refreshing everybody's mind. The Burke, the number of units, the number
sure.
of affordable units, and then Marsh 2, the number of units, the number of affordable units, so that we can kind of compare,
Are you going to test me, huh?
well, to the best of your,
The Burke in my mind, is it 175? Do you have that pulled up? We've got the
175?
175 sounds right to me. 20% affordability, 4.4 million in tax increment. The Marsh Run 2 is in the 300s, and that has, I'm looking at our dashboard in a second here. And
That's the ridge. Sorry, I'm not over in the right area.
she's getting there. 197.
With
is that
40
right?
affordable units.
Yep, 197. I had it at 300. I was thinking of the Elcott. Sorry,
Yes.
197 on the Marsh Run 2.
Yes. So Doran with Inland Development Partners is in with a new concept now. So this will be Marsh 3, which is what they're referring to it as. There's been a few other concept plans on this site previous to what you're seeing tonight. So there's
Right.
2 other proposals.
Yeah, so if you've been watching the website at all, there would have been a 24-unit proposal on this site before it was townhomes, separate, kind of not separate, but attached townhomes. There was some concerns about the area it was taking up, some of the landscaping, details like parking and garbage control and all of that. So there was lots of visiting about that with the neighborhood. And at that time, there was no financial requests. So that's why this is probably the first time you're seeing it. So the plan has evolved to what you see tonight because of that feedback. So now I'll let you talk about it.
Yes. So moving on to the proposal in front of you today, this is the new concept, which is now switched to a 4-story apartment building, which would be rental. It's being proposed as 44 units, a mix of 1 plus, and 2 bedrooms. And it's within the Marsh 2 TIF district. So it's the 3rd phase kind of Doran's projects within the site here. So Vale's to the west, Burke's to the east, and this one's in the middle. In accordance with the city's affordable housing policy, the developer would be required to do 5 units or 5% of the units at 50% AMI and 5% at 60% AMI because they're requesting a zoning change from a PID to a PUD. The developer indicated that they would not be able to provide the affordable units given that it's a 44-unit apartment building and they just can't make the numbers work to provide the affordable units at no cost to the city. So what they've done is put out 2 proposals for the EDAC to consider. The first proposal is to provide, the baseline option in the affordable housing policy with the 5 at 50 and the 5 at 60. So that would constitute 5 units within the building. The affordable rents on those would range from about $1,241 to $1,788, and they have requested $915,000 over the course of the 30 years for the affordability. And then the chart below shows the makeup of those units and how they compare to what a market rate rent would be at this time. And then the second option is to do the more elevated tax increment approach, so the 20% of the units at 50% AMI. So that would get up to 9 units with affordable rents at that same level, $1,241 to $1,490 for the 2-bedroom, because it's a, it should say 60% or no 50% unit versus the 60%, with a financing request of 1.15. It's a very preliminary sources and uses, but you can see here, which was included in your packet, the total development costs per unit are around $310, and that's primarily due a little bit higher than some of the other projects you've seen due to the fact that this is only 44 units versus some of the other projects that have been much higher, and the costs are spread over those units. Additionally, the rent, revenue, and operating expenses are within the norms for what Ellers is seeing on other projects in the region. And Shane Rudling from Ellers is here today, and he, Chair, if he could come up and walk through some of his analysis on the comparisons, we could invite him up.
Thank you. Thank you, members. Yeah, so we've got 2 performers that we looked at for this project. The 20% at 50% AMI, which would qualify the project for a couple of things. Independently, it would qualify as a housing TIF district, but we have an existing TIF district here that was created as during the Marsh 2 project. And then we have a project performa that would have a mix of 50 and 60% AMI. And so you would get a total of 5 units with the mixed project and 9 units with the 50% AMI project. And so you've probably seen this table before, where we try to look at the cost of what affordability costs the development versus a market rate apartment. And so there's a lot of math there, but if you look down at the annual income difference of $38,000 and change for the mix project, and then if you go over to the 20% at 50% AMI, that's about $88,000 and change. And then you can present value that at different time periods, and the one that we focus on here is over 30 years, because that's the term of the affordability that we're talking about. The other thing that's different between the two are property taxes. Because the 20% at 50% AMI would qualify for the 4D1 property tax classification for those units that are affordable, you'll pay a little bit less in property taxes, and you'll also generate a little less in TIF coming out of the project every year, and then over 15 years, of course. And we present value that as well. So the present value of the TIF for the mixed project is about 1.04 million, and the present value of the TIF coming out of the deal for the 20% at 50 project is about 855,000. That's generation, that's not need, that's generation. And then if you, yeah, thank you. So the way we looked at it is, you've got the 30-year affordability cost, and you've got a difference between the cost of affordability in the mixed project and the cost of the affordability in the 20% and 50% AMI project. That gets you a number of about $712,000 in present day dollars. And if you do that same math and present value the property tax savings, you get a plus number, that's the $370,000. And if you net those out, you get to a delta. This is kind of the decision point, at least on the affordability side of things, is that the extra affordability costs the development about $342,000. And so if you all decide that you'd like the mixed project, you could in theory dedicate a little less to the project, versus if you do the 20% at 50, it costs the developer more, and so that's about $342,000. We haven't had these detailed conversations with the developer yet, and that's why we're not making a recommendation tonight. There's been some vacations and things like that, but this is kind of the waypoint. There's a difference there, and that difference is about $342,000. So happy to go into any more present value detail if people want to.
I do have a question. When you're present valuing that, the rate at which you present value it is going to affect what that number is, and it's going to affect that bottom line number.
Yep.
So do you know what rate you used to present value that, and then what the basis for it was?
Yeah, so the developer used 5%, so we used that.
Okay.
Yep. Now, of course, you can, use a different number and you're going to get slightly different numbers. But if you're using the same interest rate for present valuing everything, it'll be pretty close because you're kind of moving everything similarly, and it's not going to change it much if you move it a half point or a point.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Shane relative to the proposal comparison?
Hello, thank you for being here. The question I have is, I know that you just stated this, that final design is going to determine that variance. Is there a projection about how much that variance can grow where you would have to request further TIF funding?
Members and Member Falk. So the part of this is, in discussions with the developer. We haven't had those detailed conversations with him yet to try to tease out exactly what the number is that can make the project, happen. What we can say is that number, the difference between the two projects is about that $342,000. Projects are really tough right now. Closings, especially for mixed projects, are rare. There's, I'm working on maybe only one that's kind of closing right now or imminent. The rest of the projects we're working on, and people are getting things lined up for when the markets, pick your word, stabilize, that type of thing. And those projects will be in good shape when things come into focus, and they'll be entitled and ready to go. But closings are hard and projects are hard, and equity is just sitting on the sidelines because of all the things going on. And so, it's hard these days. And so, certainly harder than it was 3 to 5 years ago.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. A couple of questions just so that I can understand this. The developer is requesting $915,000 for one scenario in TIF assistance and 1.15 in TIF assistance in another scenario. What I understand from your analysis is that you've helped to just validate the difference in the level of TIF need, but as I read your statement here, you're not necessarily recommending the 915 or the 1.5 right now. Is that correct? I just need to be clear on where we're at as far as.
Mr. President, members Sabalka, that's correct.
Okay.
Because that is part of the negotiation that we undertake with developers, is trying to figure out, are they a yield on cost developer? Are they a cash on cash developer? I was able to connect with a developer this morning, Ryan Johnson, spoke with him,
Sure.
and he relayed what we were hearing from all developers, that it's hard out there, and they're looking at trying to get equity into the deal, and people aren't paying attention right now. They can't get through to the the more detailed conversations about equity returns. Are just looking at the macro dynamics, the yield on cost and things like that. And if that yield on cost, I think you're in the development community, if that number doesn't start with a 7, people aren't paying attention.
Yes.
And so we get that, and they're certainly Doran and Co are not the first developers that we're hearing that from. So we get that, and that's why I'm not willing to make a recommendation today, because we haven't had that kind of detailed conversation with them about what the number is. Yep.
Okay, that's helpful, because I didn't see a recommendation on directly stating any sort of 915 versus the 1.15, so that's helpful. Is there any clarity, Alicia or Julie, on that?
Chair, Commissioner, the goal tonight is to get some feedback on if there's any preference towards one of the proposals
Okay.
or the other.
Great.
There is a cost to doing more affordability. The baseline is 5% at 50 and 5 at 60. The developers, throwing in the idea, well, we could do more, but it's going to require more assistance. So just some general feedback. One of the things that might help with that decision making is on their other projects on the Burke, it's 175 units, 140 were market rate, and 35 were affordable at the 50% range. And then on the other project, the Vale, they had 197 units, and 40 were affordable at the 60% and 80% range. So 20 units at 60 and 20 at 80. So it gives you a sense of what the mix would be between all three sites. I don't know, it's just looking at potentially a thoughts on one way or the other.
Can you state the Burke rates again?
Sure.
And percentages?
Yep. Those were 175 units, and 35 of them are at 50% AMI.
Mr. Chair.
Chair? One follow-up question. So help me understand, I understand how Ellers evaluates all of it, but really the developer is looking at a point in time as far as financing the debt and equity at the start of the project. And so I understand the present value of the savings of the property taxes and how you could feasibly see that as it's not more cash. It's a less cost. It's not necessarily bringing more cash to the debt equity equation of the point in time trying to finance it. So sometimes it's difficult for me to understand how Ellers seems to somehow attribute that to then the developer should be able to come up with more, because it's just, if there's no cash, there's no cash. So I'm just trying to understand how you guys understand, or how you've seen people be able to really realize the present value of something in real time when you're coming to the table and trying to get a term sheet on debt and equity.
Sure. Mr. Chair, members, Balka. So, I mean, how we look at that is we look at the NOI, and they're looking at a 29% equity and a 71% mortgage. And of course, what mortgage you can generate is a function of your NOI. And if there's a little bit of more NOI because you're not paying that much in property taxes, then you can generate more mortgage proceeds. That's simply how we do it.
It's still potentially, I understand what you're saying, and it ultimately proves more NOI. It's just ultimately capacity or debt, it's obviously what the bank is going to be able to give you. So, okay.
Sure.
I understand what you're saying. So, I don't have any further questions on.
I'd add, Mr. Chair, one other thing. Astute observers, Alicia, if you could go back to the previous slide. That one, thank you. So you'll notice on option 2, the 20% at 50, the financial request is 1.15, and the option 1, the mixed project, I call it, is 915. TIF generation is lower for the option 2 than it is for option 1, even though those are reversed on the request. So, I mean, these are the kind of details that we work out with the developer, because they may not be reflecting the fact that property taxes are going to be lower on the more affordable project, assuming that they apply and get the 4D1 property tax class rate for those units. And so that's the kind of detail that we work out, and our TIF generation number wouldn't even get to this number. I know they're using I know Ryan is using a higher assumed value to get to his TIF generation number, but this is the kind of detail that we still need to nail down.
So, help me to understand. I think what I'm reading between the lines is that we would really reasonably expect that option 2 is going to end up being more than $1.15 million.
I don't think we know that today, but it does. The TIF district doesn't generate that over 15 years. It only generates 855,000. So if they wanted 1.15, we would act, and we agreed that was the number. We would have to go beyond 15 years, or include some inflation, or agree that the units are going to be valued higher. We did get a range of value from the city assessor, and so there is some of those factors that we can move around, but yeah.
What is the duration of this TIF district?
It is a redevelopment TIF district, and it was just instituted.
Right. 16 years or 15. It was, I'm just trying to think when the first project went in. It was built in...
But it was just the Marsh 2, so it's the Marsh 2 TIF district.
Oh, right.
Yes,
And so
that's correct.
that's a redevelopment district, so it's 26 years. And so we've got 26 years. So
We could go longer than 15 years.
Yep. You could. There's other ways to get that present value higher as well, and still stay at 15 years by including some inflation into the value, or starting with a higher value number. the development deal will have a minimum assessment agreement like the other two projects, so that'll tie them to that value, and yeah, so.
From staff's perspective, is there, I think a demand is the question relative to fewer units at a higher or more units to then add 4 additional units at a 60% AMI. What is demand, and what are demand thoughts and profiles of the need for that affordable housing?
Well, I'll weigh in a little bit. Chair and council, or sorry, I'm at the wrong meeting. Chair and commissioners, sorry, my apologies. I just elevated everyone. They're now elected. Someday, perhaps. And I think this is a little bit different area. So I think the original area is harder to maybe pin down for the affordability than in Opus, because we have kind of a containment zone, if you will, in the Opus area, where the 394 area is a little bit more linear, and it's a little harder to pick up on the what would be considered the neighborhood. So when Alicia and I and others in the office talk about affordability in this area, we typically will talk about that neighborhood. And so Fairfield Road, talk about the Burke, we talk about this project, the Marsh 1-2, but also, if you didn't know that, there is affordable units in the developments to the north. So we have what we call indexed units, which are affordable ownership product. And then we have Crown Ridge, which is a tax credit project just to the, around the curve of the road. So there are, and that's lower income than 50, it's at 30% AMI. So all those units, do you have the number on that one? All of those units are kind of, you have to think about the total package of affordability in the area. I think that any affordability is going to be utilized. You're not going to go wrong with any of these options. I think these are the harder, I think that's why we wanted to come to you. These are the harder calls to make as staff. So that's why we should get a gut check from you all to kind of give us some feedback. I think either scenario works. Financially, there's a little bit in the back of your mind, like how much you really want to pay for the affordability. And that's kind of a policy question you're going to have to wrestle with. We did put a lot of 50% in the Burke, so that kind of like you had 35 units there, and then if you add what was the unit count on the 50% only, you'd have 9 total units in the second scenario. So do you want more 50%, or do you want to stratify that a little bit more by having the mix of 50 and 60? So that's the question. I don't think there's a wrong answer, and I don't think there's a market issue with any of that decision making. It's just a matter of what you think as a policy committee.
So do we know that the 35 units in the Burke are full?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. They have, if you didn't remember this, they had an agreement with Fraser Homes to do housing for folks with disabilities, challenges, and they had rented to those tenants, and it's been working out very well for them. So they actually came together and have a consistent contract for those units. What was the other? Marsh one isn't built yet. Crown Ridge is full. There's not a lot of vacancy anywhere in our multifamily projects, much less the affordable units. I don't know, does that match, Shane, with what you're thinking?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members, commissioners, members. Units, especially on the lower end of the affordability scale, are going to get occupied quickly.
Mr. Chair, I have a just general feedback. Without looking at the at least the preliminary pro forma in detail, I think the smaller projects are tough, and especially in the context here, this is kind of the last on the path of development in this little site, and the developer performed on providing affordable units on these other projects. in light of the context in placing equity right now and getting projects to close, I think, I probably normally would lean towards more affordable units, but I think if the if the question in terms of our feedback, I think if it helps the project move forward and the developer to close on this deal, this might fall into the category of more development in general, more units, housing in general, meeting affordability, coming down, increasing affordability overall. It's not going to move the needle in 44 units in a big way, but my feedback is I think the lower cost option may be a better path forward. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to mention something on page 2 of the packet of the staff report, where it says the developer's requested assistance would result in a per unit cost of approximately $6,100 per year over 30-year affordability for the 5-unit proposal and $4,259 per year for the 9-unit proposal. So just, again, very mindful of what you just said, and I just actually attended a webinar today with the Federal Reserve about construction and, just sort of the climate, and it's very difficult right now. But when you think about the per unit, that sometimes there are members of the council that do think of things per unit. And it's one of the reasons why sometimes when we look at, like homes within reach, it's $500 per year per unit versus this. But when we're trying to get a development going, I think Marsh Run, what does it say? The 4571 for Marsh Run 1. And that at the time felt kind of like really, really high. But when we're talking, it's actually less than that here. I don't know what the appetite is, but we do sort of think per unit. And so I think there is some, if you're breaking it down per unit, it's not as painful to have the higher number of the 9-unit option number 2.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I agree. We would be able to support 9 households, and we'll have that lower per unit cost. And to me, that's important.
To further support Commissioner Connors, I was noticing the rent differences. There's a rent difference of $300 on option B or option number 2. I don't know how we're distinguishing the 2 options, but on the second option, there seems like that $300 on a month savings for a household is pretty significant. That's money that can be returned to Minnetonka in some form, whether it's shopping or with community development. So that's something else to consider, how that money comes back to the community.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes.
I'm not familiar with the 4D property tax classification. Is that an application and something that they, may or may not get? I'm just not sure what the requirements are for that. Can you please detail that?
Sure. Mr. Chair, members Sabulka, the 4D property tax classification was put into law in 2023. It allows projects that are more than 20% affordable to apply for a lower class rate than they would otherwise be able to get. So the class rate on those units is 0.25 versus 1.25 for market rate units. And so it ultimately, how the math works is you take the value of the unit times the class rate. That gets you tax capacity, and you take the tax capacity times the various tax rates. And so the tax capacity is considerably less on those affordable units, yielding less taxes and less TIF. That used to exist, but it used to be more tiered, and it just got more aggressive in 2023. It used to be called 4D, now it's 4D1 because there's another subclass there as well. So there's limits in the city. If the city has a lot of 40 applicants, you're no more than, don't quote me, I think it's 2% of your tax base can be in 40 or something like that. Most cities don't have that issue. But it would behoove most developers to do that. They're going to save money, so why wouldn't they? Yeah.
And that's what you think the rationale behind the option 2 proposal is from the developer?
Right, that's the slide that I present valued the property tax savings to get that other difference. So you've got the cost of the extra affordability in the non-mix option, and then you've got some savings that get you more money. So to Member Sabalka's question, how much NOI is it taking away with the affordability, and then how much NOI are you getting back because the property taxes are a bit lower? That will yield mortgage proceeds. The bank will look at NOI and say, okay, how much mortgage can you get based on that revenue, and that's how we look at it.
Yes.
I'm curious if is the developer present? Is there a preference on the option from the developer's perspective, or what they think the market might be, demanding based on the options?
Good evening. My name's Tom Dillon with Inland Development Partners. I should say, first of all, I didn't underwrite this project. Ryan Johnson who's our CFO did, and I think that's actually who you talked to, Shane, so he has a much better understanding. But my understanding from him is not necessarily. There's not a significant difference to us. So I think we'd be open to either one that would get this project going.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? I did have just a couple in support of the fellow members and Councilmember Calvert's comment that I think the cost, in my notes, cost per unit is high at $6,100 a unit. And if we can get that cost per unit down and not have to have that much additional, incrementally the additional ask for 9 units versus 5 units in my mind was $200,000 for those additional units. Seemed to be some economies of scale for having the more number of units, the 9 units versus the 5 units. So I think my personal preference in support of some of the other members is to make a recommendation to go with the 9 units, the 5 at 50 and 4 at 60. And I don't know if more members of the commission have a similar outlook.
Yeah, I think I'm just kind of struggling to understand all the variables at play here. Obviously, making them affordable changes the property tax element of it, which is a long-term drag, but it increases affordability, which is a good thing. So is there anywhere in here, I might have missed it, kind of the projected all-in cost for the 5 versus the 9 units over that 30-year time horizon?
Shane, do you happen to?
Because I think one thing that we commonly use in this group is like, what's the cost per unit?
Right.
Or whether it was the twin home or whatever, we're trying to figure out how we dole out money for affordability in the city. And I'm just trying to use that measuring stick in the situation.
Sure, Mr. Chair, members, Member Haig. So the TIF generation is $855,000 or $1 million, depending on which option you've got there. Because this is a TIF district, the cost to the community is comprised of the city's taxes, the county's taxes, and the school district taxes and the other taxing jurisdictions. So it's about a third. just don't quote me on those thirds, but so your cost, just say it's $1 million to kind of average the two, to do the project and get the affordability. You're looking at, somewhere around a third of that, in present value dollars. Of course, over time, it's a lot more in principal and interest. Does that answer the question?
But Shane, above and beyond the base property value, because we'll continue to collect on base value. I just want to make sure that's clear. Not for you, but the audience might not know that.
Absolutely, yes.
Yes, thank you.
But at this point in time, I think what we're looking at is if we are prepared to make a recommendation to the city council to provide feedback on which avenue the Economic Development Advisory Commission is recommending to the city council. Is that?
We're actually just looking for your feedback, so I think we kind of heard we have the gist of what people's concerns are, so I think we can go back and talk to the developer and get a final package for you to look at. So this was just kind of conceptual, so I think we've gotten to the point where we wanted your feedback. Second thing is, just to make sure there are audience members here, if anybody else wants to say anything, I just want to remind the chair that you can call upon them. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any, there are audience members which we're not accustomed to having, so welcome. If there's anything that you wanted to say with regard to this. All right, thank you. Yes.
Just one other general question. So the 4D designation, wasn't familiar with that until we talked about it tonight. Is there any kind of benefit for that in the future, whether it's financing grants, tax benefits in the future once the property is designated as such?
Mr. Chair, members, Member Haig, the answer is that in 2023 it was set up as a way for developers of affordable units to, the intent was to keep those units affordable at 60% AMI or less. There are some requirements in the statute where the developers of properties have to use that money in a particular way, but they're pretty loose and nobody really knows exactly how to implement that yet. It is, I think the core of it is, and who knows, how that statute will evolve. It's changed a couple of times in recent memory. So I think it is just lower property taxes for those units that both would be built as affordable. And of course it applies to projects that exist today that want to do income verification and keep the affordability that already exists in the project, or lower rents a little bit so that they could.
And there's not a time limit that sunsets?
Not currently, no.
Chair, Commissioner Haig, it's also another tool that cities use. They can create their own 4D programs and add additional requirements onto it. So that's a tool that some cities choose to use to encourage existing buildings to create more affordable units and get that tax incentive, and then they may ask for some sustainability or other types of improvements in the buildings in order to qualify.
The other thing I think is important, 4D is not a new classification. It is just evolved in the statute about how it's done. So I think that's important. It's always been there. How it's been utilized has changed.
Chair, one additional comment. My assumption earlier in the conversation was that the second option from a equity underwriting standpoint was going to that would be more challenging to make the deal work. If the developer's saying, I know you didn't underwrite the deal, but if there's no strong preference and they're able to move forward with either path, I think additional affordable units would be great.
I think we're kind of in agreement that more is better.
Thank you.
Hey, I think we're done with that, and we are moving on to item number 2, which is the Economic Improvement Program. And when I left tonight, I said this is going to be typically a long meeting because whenever we go through this, it is indeed as we go through it. So I think we get started on it. And especially since we do have new commissioners who are not as familiar with the Economic Improvement Plan.
Chair, Commissioners.
Thank you very much for coming tonight. Appreciate it.
Chair, Commissioners, we are before you tonight with our first draft of the Economic Improvement Program for 2026 through 2030. I've spared going through each page with you, and I've set up my presentation to go over the highlights and some of the things that I'm looking for additional input on as we go to the City Council meeting in a few weeks here, just 2 weeks. So with that, I will get started here. So generally, just like to provide a brief overview. So the Economic Improvement Program aligns with our city's strategic plan, so the goals that the council sets out for us to accomplish within a 3-year period of time. But for the city's funding, there wouldn't be a program, so that's why we have these discussions, like our financing requests from developers, programming that isn't provided by other organizations or agencies that try to attempt to meet the city goals. And we look at various areas of economic development, so transportation, housing, business, and redevelopment. On the EIP schedule, we are at the May 28th meeting, so the next meeting's the June 16th City Council study session, so I'll take your feedback from tonight, incorporate that into their report, and then make any changes to the EIP ahead of that meeting. And then back into August, I'll come back to the EDAC and share the final version and the recommendations that will be presented to the City Council. And then in September, it goes to City Council for approval. So a few months ago, we covered our fund overview of what are the funding sources that we utilize to implement our various programs. So we have our development account, which it looks like it has a very significant fund balance, but there's a lot of commitments out of the development fund. There's line of credits for various projects in Opus and for what am I trying to say? Development escrows, so we'll borrow from this and then pay it back with TIF and other sources of funding. Livable communities accounts, that's traditionally what Homes Within Reach is used for their programming. That's been committed over time, and they've had some struggles purchasing new housing with the costs the way they are, so they have a little bit of a balance sitting there for when they do find appropriate homes to purchase. The Community Development Block Grant, that is now the city's part of a consolidated pool, and a little bit of that information was included in your packet. So what that really means is previously Minnetonka had received its own allocation that was administered through the county, and now that allocation is pooled with the other cities that are in the consortium. So not only do we have access to the dollars that we had previously, but now we have access to the entire pool. So if we have special projects that we want to request funding for, we can do so now, when previously we were strictly awarded our $125,000 a year, and that's all we had access to. So that starts here, I think, in 2025-26. So we'll be transitioning into the pool and looking for more opportunities to access those dollars for our special projects. In addition to continuing to provide our emergency rehab program that we currently run through the county. The HRA levy is under consideration every year for various housing programs. There's a listing there of the various commitments over the years, and kind of adds up to that fund balance there for existing housing. The LRT payment for this year was the very last payment of that 10-year commitment, so that's not in the HRA levy request for this year, so that's new. That's finally over. We've had, the emergency business assistance had 50,000. We've had one loan out of that effort. There's been a buildup of business marketing, but we are spending that through Thrive and other methods of trying to get our word out to the business community. And then we've had commitments to our housing loans and then pathways, which I'll focus on a little bit later in the slides. On the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, we started with a balance of about nearly 5 million, but as you know, some of the projects that have been presented to EDAC, including Cedar Hills, Mills Twin Homes, Amani Construction, COVID programming for emergency rental assistance, and homelessness response, and pathways have all been funded through the trust fund. So we're sitting at about 2.5 million for an existing balance on that fund. And then newly created the LAHA, the Local Area Housing Assistance Sales Tax Funding. We received our first contribution last winter, and we'll be receiving 2 more payments this year, which I'm not quite sure what those will be yet because they're based off a sales tax. Those dollars can be used for new programming. The city, I think as staff, we're trying to maybe direct them towards one singular affordable housing project due to the fact that the reporting requirements can be challenging if you have to track a lot of metrics every year. On the main page of the housing slide, it summarizes that the 5-year estimate for the programs is about 1.6 million. This page might look a little different to you than it did last year or the last 10 years that we've had this chart. What I've done is really focused in on the programs that the city has influence over or funding for, and I've removed the sources or the programs or initiatives that were funded through other sources and maybe not as regular programming that we can't rely on long term. So things like housing and redevelopment loans that may be tied to a very specific project, or things that require, they're more project-based than individual programming. But then I did note on the bottom of the page some of those efforts below, and then at the end of the EIP there's a summary of all of the grants that we've received over the last 10 years or so. So just trying to clean it up so it makes, so it's easier to understand where these dollars are coming from and which of them are city or local funding sources and not external, I guess is the best way to put it. With that, I'll just run through a couple things. With Homes Within Reach, the recommended amount for this year for them is the administrative, ongoing administrative cost of $25,000, primarily due to the fact that we've been in discussion with Homes Within Reach regarding the one of the city-owned properties that we own, the Belmont property, having them look at that for a development opportunity. So instead of contributing the 125, which we would normally recommend, we're looking at that because the city has previously purchased this. We're trying to decide what to do with it. And that might be a good opportunity. So that's the reasoning behind that. On the Minnetonka Home Enhancement and the Welcome to Minnetonka programs, they continue to have steady utilization in your packet. We did 4 loans between them last year, and there's 1 loan in progress this year, and there's about $337,000 remaining for those 2 programs, which are we kind of think of them as combined together and administered through CEE. On the homeless response, we continue that effort in total through 2022 through 2025, we've assisted 84 individuals and 40 households, and we still have roughly 124,000 remaining of the 200,000. So there's definitely assistance there. We're seeing roughly 5 to 10 a year. It's slowed down a bit since COVID, so not as high of utilization since we originally started the homeless response program. And then also emergency rental assistance is another area we've been focused on. We have a balance of around almost 60,000 in that program, and 212 households have been assisted since the implementation of that, and we serve about 10 a year throughout that program. So there's a little bit more information on demographics and whatnot in your packet, so just wanted to highlight some of those areas. I set out a separate side for pathways because this is one of those programs that we heard there was a need for an additional home ownership program because of the median cost of homes in Minnetonka being high, and folks that haven't traditionally been able to own a home were not able to access housing in Minnetonka. So we brought the program in front of the EDAC a few years ago, and it was established, and it really provides kind of a maximum amount of affordable housing assistance for down payment to households earning as low as 30% AMI all the way up to 120% AMI. And it provides up to $75,000 on a sliding scale. So the lower the income, the higher the amount of assistance that one can receive. And with that program, the homeowner does have to bank qualify. So it's not that they would get a higher amount of assistance and not be bank qualified. They still have to meet the lending criteria, but it's tailored to their AMI. So it's been a great program, and as you can see, we are down to $73,000 of the $400,000 that was committed for this year as of like 2 months ago, I think. So we've recommended that we levy 175 of the HRA for 2026. So that would constitute that 100,000 that traditionally goes to Homes Within Reach, and then the 75 was that Southwest LRT commitment that's been completed. But that still leaves 2025 with, I think we may even have a loan in progress right now that could utilize almost some of that or all of it. So that is one of the items on tonight's docket to discuss whether or not there's support for continued funding at the council in 2025 and then in 2026. So we can cover that now, or if you want to wait till the end, it's also on the end slide.
I'd say let's tackle it right now, because I think it's kind of right in front of everybody and everybody's thinking about it.
I just wanted to say what a popular program it is, forgivable loan. I think it's outstanding. I would hate to see that go away.
I mean, it's just so awesome to see the utilization. A lot of these programs were worried about utilization, and so for programs that are being utilized, I think we should continue to prioritize. I'd be in full support of adding additional resources to this. Clearly, our community is asking for it.
I have a question. Do we have an idea of where the loans are in terms of that sliding scale? How many are at what percentage versus how many at a higher percentage?
I can do some quick look here at the demographics that I have for the loan amounts. We've had one that has fallen within the highest level of that 75,000. So they would have to be at or below 50% AMI to get that 75. And then the rest sit roughly between, anywhere from
16,000 is the lowest and up to 62. So they're all spread within that, which would be even less than what our, you couldn't exceed for having 120% of AMI. Your maximum is 50. So I think we're seeing that it's helping people throughout the whole spectrum, no matter what their AMI is, but we're not hitting that maximum very often for that.
Just a general question in terms of administrative cost for running these programs. I know CEE is a great organization, tend to have really great network and resources of people to talk to, but where does that burden fall in terms of administrator?
Yeah, so for the Pathways program, each loan that is done by CEE is about $1,100 for admin costs per loan.
Just generally, because I'm wondering if there's a couple different programs, do a couple different things, all are popular, but if there was like a large administrative cost, maybe simplifying them in some way, but it seems like it's running pretty lean, which is great. Thanks.
Chair, I just wanted to comment. What I like about this program is, the affordability, or the income requirements go up to 120% AMI, and just knowing so many families on the younger end of the spectrum who are working families, but the cost of housing in this community is a barrier, and so I know that's a policy goal, and this helps achieve that. So I would be in support of additional funding.
Yes.
I agree that the programs that are utilized are good programs, keep people housed, give them a chance to own a better home than what they would normally be able to afford. My question is, I know that we moved funding from one program to another. The previous program assisted lower income with financial education as well. What I'm wondering is, if we continue to support this program, are we ignoring another program that could serve a different population that also needs some sort of financial support? So I'm not quite sure about additional funding. If the program's being used, keep using it, but my hope is that we still don't leave other families behind.
Chair, Commissioner Falk, the other down payment assistance is, I guess, less restrictive to access, and there is a balance of $337,000 for that program. Yeah.
The balance that's been committed to homes within reach is $673,000. That's not really being utilized at this point in time. Is it possible to reallocate those dollars from homes within reach to Pathways?
Chair and Commissioners, once that agreement has been made, which was previously trying to renegotiate and take that money away, I think that's difficult. You've kind of promised the organization the funding already. So I would say you would have to have the council change. I'm not even sure they can do that. I'd have to ask, actually. Legally, I don't think they can do that, but we can check that for you before we come back.
Chair, Commissioners, the only other point I would make to what Julie said is that when they're applying for other funding through agencies, they've committed those dollars that were committed to them. So it's like a cyclical process. However, I will note that the funds that are in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund that remain, the $2 million, are not committed. So those are more easily reallocated, and it's just a simple council action to approve those funds with CEE for programming in 25, which is what we've done in the past for.
Yeah, I was trying to think the other funds for the lower amount down payment, we could make those more fluid between the two programs. We did that before with the rehab and the, what was that?
It gets a little murky.
I know it does, it does, but sometimes it's hard because if you see more activity in one program, you don't want to stifle that. And so just having a balance sit over here is not doing anything. So I think that's a difficult call, I guess. How much do you want to leave in the one account and not do this? So it's hard.
And I would just say, just thinking about the way some of my colleagues think about the different programs and what they do, there's at least one council member who takes exception to sort of the land trust model. However, to Commissioner Falk's point, it's a slightly different, I mean, the cost of the housing goes way down when you take the cost of the land out of it. And so the calculations about, who's accessing what and why and what might be best for people, I mean, there's money already allocated for homes within reach. And so there's that. And I would say that one of the reasons that council members had some enthusiasm for the other loan programs is because of what we were talking about, the high cost of housing for first-time home buyers and young people and working families. And the Pathways program really was meant to target a similar group of people, but to the homes within reach home buyers, but they get full equity because they own the entire home. And so there was a lot of enthusiasm for that program because they get the entire, it's not just 35% of the equity and there's no, as I understand it, those homes, it's a loan on a home. There's no profit limit. The value of the home can be sold for whatever the market value is, and so it reaches different people for different reasons, and they both give access to people to live in Minnetonka and access all of our wonderful quality of life factors, but it's very, very different, and I see that there's so much interest in the Pathways program. It's really, you take a gamble on something like that and you hope it works, and it seems to be working, so.
Don't know if there's any consensus among the members relative to funding additional dollars to Pathways from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. But that is kind of the way that I envision trying to expand what is a successful program and to utilize those programs that are successful programs and are gaining traction. So I look at it from that standpoint. And I take it one step further in retaining kind of some of the TIF districts and utilizing those additional revenues coming in from the TIF districts to fund the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, having those dollars go in there, and then having those dollars available for a program like Pathways.
Moving on to initiatives for this year and next year. This is fairly high level. This is our last housing slide, I promise. The levy, as I mentioned, this is what staff is recommending. So for the continuation of our down payment and housing programs, $100,000, Pathways $175,000, again, that's for 2026, and then Homes Within Reach, that continued admin. From the trust fund, I'm hearing support for potentially some additional funding towards Pathways this year. We continue to look at opportunities to purchase underutilized single-family properties, and also we haven't had one recently, but preserving our existing housing, some of our aging housing stock. We have good owners in Minnetonka that take care of their properties, so we haven't had as many opportunities in that area, but I'm assuming we will at some point. Our city-owned sites, so Roland Road is that property that Amani is redeveloping into the twin home. They are hoping to close here in a week or two and then start construction in this summer and finish by the end of the year. So trying to work through that and get that project closed. We're looking at the sale of Belmont to Homes Within Reach. And then also new this year, we've been out to tour some a manufactured home builder as an opportunity to build affordable housing. So that's something that we'll be exploring. And later this year, you might see some of those proposals come through. So there's some sites that we are currently considering. The Baker Road site, which is just south of that Roland Road site, and then the Welland Road we picked up a few years ago. On housing initiatives, the homeless response, Kendall's been working on an encampment policy that'll go in front of the city council later this year. The manufactured homes, we're working through ZoneCo, the zoning rewrite, so that's well underway. Kendall's been working on the rental registry program. We're in our first year of renewal, so she's been busy on that. We're looking at doing just kind of an informational handout on legacy housing, so how a homeowner could preserve their existing single family for affordable housing through a covenant if they're feeling that they want to make their home affordable to the next owner. So that'll be something that'll come through. And then we have a current grant application in for additional funding for our rental assistance program. So hoping we'll find out. That was a one-time Minnesota housing free-for-all.
Double cross our fingers.
They said apply for this one-time funding, so we did. So that's what we have going on at the moment.
Though. It was a lot of money.
Yeah, a couple $100,000.
Yeah.
And that's what I have on the housing chapter. Any other questions on housing before we go ahead? All right.
We didn't scare them yet
Okay.
with all of the big ideas we have in this document.
Yes, and this is the summary. If you actually want all of the detail of every program, you can go through the document. On the business chapter, we've covered some of this in our previous meeting. Not much has changed with the business programming. Let me just get to my summary here. On Greater MSP, that's our regional support for regional attraction of business and I'm trying to think of the word. I'm blanking on my word. Regional retention effort through that organization. So we continue to support them, and through that support, they help us with companies that are looking to locate within Minnetonka and provide a lot of technical assistance for those efforts. Then we have our business advisory services. So that is Elevate Hennepin, and they have been completely elevating their offerings in terms of how many consultants that they have available for entrepreneurs and businesses. And I know there's stats in our packet that I'm trying to find here. They are up to, okay, they assisted in 2024, 28 businesses with over 485 hours of technical assistance. And then in 2025, we're still waiting for our data, but we get great utilization of that program and a lot of hours of technical assistance. So it's great utilization of our city dollars. On outreach, those are things like newsletters. Oh, go ahead.
Is that helping to support maybe any gap in like SBA advisors and things like that from the federal level? I'm just curious. If they're leaning in, that might be why they're increasing.
Chair Ramatka, Commissioner Sabolka, recently I believe that Elevate Hennepin rolled out a gap assistance program. It's very, very new, and I can maybe provide an update at the next meeting on what exactly that looks like, but I know there's now a financing component to their programming, aside from just the technical assistance. Okay. Moving on to regional chambers, we belong to the Wayzata Chamber and the Minneapolis Regional Chamber, which is now, I don't know, merging with St. Paul. Not sure. We're still trying to figure out what's going on there, but Kirsten's been attending the chamber events and coming up with content to share with the members, so it's been a great effort to share our information. And then the sewer access charge, this is our favorite program to talk about. This is primarily, helping out our small businesses with fees that they had no idea what they were before they wanted to start a business. So we get good utilization. I think on our EIP page it lists out, I think we have 10 active businesses in repayment since we started this program, and typically those can be generally $50,000 and under is typically what we see for those. And then a few years ago, the EDAC recommended the emergency business assistance and the commercial code compliance program. And so far we've had one emergency business assistance provided and then one commercial code compliance loan. So we're getting some utilization there. And then again, on the bottom of the page, that covers various efforts that are other dollars that come through the state, which are sometimes millions of dollars to support investment in the community. And then there's things like special assessments that sometimes come through as well for fire sprinkler upgrades and PACE, which is an energy program. So on that, the highlights are, a few months back, we've presented the business survey, so we're following up on some of the feedback we've received through that. And then identifying our contacts at our large corporations, as that was a key measure in our strategic plan. We've completed the market analysis, and now we're incorporating those results into our work. Kirsten picks up business canvassing again in the summer when it's a little more pleasant to be outside and connect with people, so she'll be out visiting our community businesses. We're working with our sustainability staff on business efforts and trying to encourage our businesses to be more sustainable. Again, the Wayzata Chamber and then our Elevate Hennepin. And then one thing I thought we could touch on just briefly that came out of our last EDAC meeting was some outreach that Kirsten had completed with our nonprofits. And I'm going to turn it over to her because she has the detailed information for you.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. So this came out of a comment that Commissioner Anderson made at the end of our last EDAC meeting, if you all recall. Curious about the health of our local nonprofits, particularly as their funding sources may have been shifting. And so based off of that, we reached out to the other departments in the city to learn more about what nonprofits they see helping Minnetonka residents. And from that, we heard about 14 key nonprofits that are serving our residents. Now, those nonprofits may not be physically located in Minnetonka themselves, but they are supporting our residents here through a variety of ways. And so I reached out to these 14 nonprofits and was able to have conversations with 6 of them, with either their presidents, their CEOs, or their development directors. And first, I'd like to acknowledge that they were all happy to hear from the city. So they expressed gratitude to have these conversations, and a few of them also offered to do additional tours or have future meetings about their work. Second, I just want to acknowledge that this was a pulse check. This was not intense qualitative research, but these were informal conversations with these organizations. And there wasn't an overarching theme. So that's why we put together this chart here to kind of sort into different categories the different situations that they're experiencing, because they are not all the same. As you can see, in terms of giving, there's been diverse experiences both in terms of corporate and private giving, or individual giving rather. Some are seeing decreases, including from foundations, and I heard themes about how struggles with the larger economy is impacting how giving is happening. So I heard about foundations had been kind of opening their doors, some that had been invite only, and COVID changed that policy, and now we're reverting back to their original policy of being invite only instead of accepting asks from the larger community. But it wasn't across the board organizations saying the giving has gone down. For some, it has stayed consistent or even gone up. And in terms of funding, I didn't really hear much about direct federal funding. There was only, I believe, one, if that, that received any direct funding, and even for that organization, that federal funding wasn't going to the Minnetonka location. It was just a larger nonprofit that was receiving that funding. For the rest of them, a lot of them were receiving direct state funding, so they commented that maybe that could indirectly impact them because of federal funding that comes through the state. And what that meant for them, a lot of them, regardless of whether or not they were experiencing a change in their finances, they were deeply concerned, each one, with a specific change that was happening at the federal level. So I heard about Medicaid, Medicare, immigration changes, SNAP, Older American Act, HUD, so on and so forth, DEI. They all had a particular area that they were very concerned about, and that could be indirectly impacting their situation. Maybe demand for their services would go up in a way that they didn't think that they had the capacity to meet it. Some of them were actually currently in a stage of growth and fearing stagnation, or that they'd have to pull back as different programs change, or that the oversight for the community that they serve would no longer exist because work was being divided amongst different agencies or going away. So I wish I had one simple sentence to tell you of what our local nonprofits are experiencing, but it's been a pretty diverse experience.
Any reactions? Any questions?
Since I raised the question, I just say, first of all, I really appreciate that outreach, and this is, they clearly appreciated hearing from city staff. I think it's great for us to keep a pulse on this, and so this is helpful. Working in the nonprofit sector, I'll say, I talk to executive directors, presidents regularly, and right now, and I sit on a couple boards, and it's bleak for a lot of nonprofits right now, especially those that rely on foundations, and so I don't know how representative this is, and maybe it's stronger in this community than Twin Cities metro-wide, but I'm just grateful for the outreach and for these leaders that you spoke with to know that that we're in, that the city government is paying attention to it. So thank you.
Moving on to the transit chapter, the funding that goes to community services is through our general fund, and it's based off of our population. So it escalates over time. That service encourages folks to commute and use all sorts of various rideshare methods. We also, in this chapter in the EIP, note our various transit grants and Metro Transit services that are provided. As you know, we just went through the big transit study, and we'll be re-upping the contract with Metro Transit later this summer. So that's going to council in July. And we're hoping that out of our efforts with our study, that we'll have some new transit services in the community ahead of LRT opening. So with that, when Nelson Nygaard presented the transit study, they recommended looking at last mile and micro transit opportunities. So that is in the works. Metro Transit has a grant in, a federal grant application in that specifically names Minnetonka as a recipient of some dollars to try and implement microtransit. There was some discussion about connections from to Opus Station to Shady Oak Station, so cross-connecting that, and then up to Ridgedale from Opus. So looking into, is there a need or a demand for those types of routes in anticipation of opening day. And then we continue to build out Opus with our trail system and also around the city when we have redevelopment projects as well. And that's what I had for transit. We did hear today that they'll start testing on LRT later this year. So you'll start to see Metro Trans is going to do a lot of communication out to the public because the lines will be active, but there will be no trains to ride. They're just testing them, but they shouldn't be running across the tracks. So let's hope that all of that messaging goes well. I know they're going to put messaging out on the station areas themselves, but we will be awaiting communications from them to push out to our residents later in the summer.
That will take another year and a half.
Another year and a half to communicate.
Remind me, when is the actual date? 2027?
27.
Okay.
The red lights are lit on the rails. I just don't understand.
Just not to defend anything, but there is a lot of technical and the pace at which they have to check all of the tracks and all of the electronics that go along with the track. It is a very tedious process. So, I mean, we saw it with when the original Green Line was installed, and it was a good year plus before they were ready.
Inch by inch.
Inch by inch. That's how they described it. Yep. Yep. You're correct.
On the development and redevelopment chapter, this is really the area where we talk about the various studies that we're doing. So we highlighted the business survey, the commercial market analysis, the transit study, and now we're working on zoning. So that is the highlight for this year. We'll be working through new zoning standards and draft ordinances, and there'll be a lot of public engagement around this effort. That's already started, but it'll start to formulate a little bit more and be more tangible in the upcoming months. So we'll be working through that. And that is what I have for you tonight. So in summary, we'll continue working on our existing programs with our existing fund balances. We're looking at manufactured home as affordable home ownership options, drafting the homeless encampment policy, trying to sell Belmont, implementing new initiatives with transit, with the input from the transit study, business survey, and the commercial market analysis. And with that, our HRA levy recommended was, as stated earlier, with the pathways at 175,000, Minnetonka home enhancement at 100,000, and then homes within reach at 25. And I'll leave it open to you, Chair.
Thank you. So discussion questions, I think we already tackled the second one. Does the EDAC recommend committing additional funding to pathways in 2025? And I think our answer to that collectively was yes. So the first question I think is the more pressing. Is there anything else, this is kind of the open-ended question, any additional direction that any of the commissioners have relative to the upcoming 5-year EIP?
I have a question. It wasn't clear to me what the use, I saw the source for the year for the LAHA. Do we have was there a use tied to that in the EIP?
Chair Commissioner Anderson, there is no use at this time. Our discussion recently has been that we would try to fund one large project. So whether that's a big redevelopment that's coming in that's requesting assistance for affordable housing, that would be a good use of it, and just due to the reporting requirements. Maybe another thought on that is,
And we have 4 years
yeah,
to spend it. So 4 years we have to spend every time we get an allocation. It's 4 years. That's also another kind of mind trip to keep track of when that money comes in, and then the years to, it keeps rolling. So I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry.
No, it's good. Oh, maybe one other thing to add is that if it is a program, it has to have to be a new program that the city hasn't done in the past.
Right.
So that's the other weird caveat on that one.
That was the CDBG.
This is the LAHA, the sales tax money that's new this year.
I'm sorry. EG. What is the likelihood that the city would actually be able to access 745,000 out of that? And then what uses could those funds be used for?
Chair Ramatka, the CDBG regulations are kind of complicated, but the county has committed to providing technical assistance with the access to those additional dollars. So I think we could be fairly creative. Typically, we would likely use it for affordable housing. However, there's a blight test. There's like 3 tests, and I'm trying to remember what they are off the top of my head, but there's 3 different uses for CDBG funds, and public uses is typically not one of them. So it's blighted properties and buildings, affordable housing, and then there's one other one which is not coming to me at this moment.
Public service.
Public service, but not for not for building public spaces. So it's a little bit harder to make the test for that one for federal funding. So a lot of people don't access for public service use, for larger public service.
So it'd be like amenities, like a park or...
It has to meet a national objective, which could be the population, so like a lower AMI area that a park or something would
Might
serve.
benefit.
The test is very difficult to meet. It's very specific on who the dollars are serving. So a city couldn't just utilize it to build a park or a structure if it's not serving a specific population
That has the
that
right
has
income.
like a lower AMI or some other test that you can go down a rabbit hole to try and meet.
Yeah, it's hard
So
to qualify.
it's hard to, yeah. Usually if a city has an idea about a project they want to attract additional dollars on with CDBG, we'll reach out to the county or someone at a higher level at HUD and kind of vet the idea and say like what part of the CDBG funding could we use for this project, and then we come up with that, figure out what would be eligible in the project that we're trying to fund. And sometimes it's down payment assistance, sometimes it's very rarely constructing a city type improvement. Yeah.
We've never used that way. No.
Can you just refresh my memory, go back to the timeline slide for the EIP? So we're at May 28th right now. We've reviewed it and provided initial feedback. The August meeting is where we'll look to make a recommendation to the city council. So from the
Correct.
commissioner's standpoint, that's a point in time before that August meeting. We'll need to kind of drill down individually and take a look and see where we're at and any comments so that we can discuss that.
I think, Chair, the other thing that happens in the sequencing is on June 16th, you'll hear what the council has to say to what you've prepared. So if they want to, have more information about a particular recommendation you have, they'll ask you to do more homework or ask you to think about something. So that happens quite often at the June meeting, and then you'll hear about that in August. So.
And I do just want to say that not just the comments and the feedback, but the questions are just the questions that you ask sometimes get the council to think about things, and it's good to hear the questions and the answers and then get the feedback. And it's really helpful because everybody here has a slightly different perspective and perhaps even a skill set, and you gain a lot from hearing everyone's feedback. So I just want to encourage, especially the very new folks, don't be scared. It's all good. No question's a bad question, because we have newish council members too, and so the questions you have may be the questions that they have as well.
In the spirit of that, I have a question. So on the business category side of things, there was a reference that kind of in the past, the city was more reactive in terms of business outreach and is in our new program being much more proactive. And one idea I thought of, I'll pose it in form of a question. A lot of emphasis, understandably, is on the Ridgedale area, and it's a big economic driver for the city. But I think what makes the city unique from a quality of life standpoint is the small village neighborhood commercial districts that we have. Is maybe the best way to call it, neighborhood commercial district. And my question is then, is there something additional we could be doing to focus proactively on those neighborhood commercial areas from a small business standpoint?
I can answer that maybe because I've been here the longest.
Yeah.
Chair Hamaka and Commissioner Anderson, I think that definitely that was a theme after the last comprehensive plan that we go and dig into. We did call them village centers. That's the terminology we actually used. We did a deep dive into 101 and Highway 7. There's a plan that goes along with that area. 5 and 101 we did. That was a while back. We did Glen Lake. Maybe, I'm going to go 7 times we did Glen Lake.
Are these small area plans?
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. And some economics with it, though, so that we didn't just have plans without having some reality with those plans. I think the areas that maybe we didn't get to that I still think about a lot, I think about Cedar Lake Road and Hopkins Cross Road a lot in terms of what could be and, what kind of redevelopment we could see there. That part is exciting. We spent a lot on Minnetonka Mills, not just recently, but historically. We've spent a lot of time thinking about that area. Any other ones that pop into your head that we haven't done?
So you did 7 and 101.
Yeah, we did.
Minnetonka Boulevard and 101.
Yep, we did that one. Did I miss some? That you
I
were
don't know,
thinking
but
of?
it seems to me that with the amount of housing that's going on in Opus, there's got to be something that maybe that
We
is
do have a
driven
plan there,
somewhat
too,
by the
yeah.
city with planning about having some kind of amenities and
We
creating
do.
it in
Yeah.
Opus.
Yeah, we have a huge plan for public space in Opus, and that we've been working on that for a long time. But the last 3 years, I would say that really trying to figure out the finances and the funding for that. We haven't gotten the traction quite yet. We don't have access sales tax. We don't have some of the, I know. I shouldn't say it, it's frustrating. But, and then bonding, we have some bonding money for that area for planning the improvement, but we haven't had the full funding from the state on that, and the bonding bill didn't pass, so we thought we were included, and then it didn't pass anyway. So there are definitely some plans in Opus for significant public investment, but as far as small area plans, I think a refreshment is something I'm thinking about, so I'm not too far afield of where you're going. And in fact, when we do the comp plan again, I think we should probably think about reinvigorating those small area plans again, kind of digging in a little bit more, updating, etc. What do you think?
I agree. One of the things that I think is unique about our staff and just our relationships is some of our best relationships are with our small businesses in those areas, because we have relationships with the landlords and the business owners, and they know to come to us when they have a new tenant that needs a SAC program or needs help with signage or whatever it may be, or their lease, or the efforts through Elevate Hennepin. So I feel like we have a really good handle on the small businesses in those areas, because they know to call Julie. No, I'm just kidding. Then she calls me and says, get back to them on this.
No, I think you're right. And I think with the help of Kirsten and the sustainability efforts, that's getting even more FaceTime with folks. So I think some of that outreach, but I don't disagree with you that the small area plans are kind of key to making sure people know where we're headed. I would say we had a lot of traction on 5 and 101, but not on 7 and 101. And like I said, we didn't give enough attention to Cedar Lake Road either. So I think some of those things are definitely on the docket. We do have do we still have the village area plans in the?
I think so. On
Yeah, there's a page that has that in there, but maybe let's see if we can write more, based on your comment, we could write more about that in the plan. I think that would be helpful. So, yeah, we can do that.
One thing about Opus also is that periodically the council, it's sort of a build it, the whole visioning was, build it and they will come. So you build the housing, and not so much like park amenities, but maybe the kinds of businesses that would sort of fill out the community. So that, you need the restaurants and the dry cleaner and the this and the that. It's not, I guess it's
Work out that way.
so council thinks about that, I will say, and it's just one of those chicken and egg. It's not quite soup yet, I guess. So
Still cooking.
it's still cooking, but it is something that I personally am anxious to see. It's just you can't force it, and I don't. Until the light rail actually is going, I think it's going to be hard to get it going.
We have a brief summary of the efforts. We'll think about how to strengthen that in there.
Before we adjourn, I just want to thank Councilmember Calvert for her input, because it really gives us a lot of idea and just the kind of what's going on with the council. So thank you very much for that. And then also to the staff for doing a great job of putting this together and making it easy for us to kind of navigate our way through this. So thank you very much. I think so.
That's it.
I think with
Next meeting?
with that, next meeting is June 12th, which is a Thursday night, I believe.
Do you have some, or did we cancel that one?
We haven't canceled it yet, but it is a week away for the packet to go out, so I don't know that we have any items, but maybe Julie has something in
No,
mind.
I did. I talked to somebody today. And what was it? Oh my goodness. You know what? I think I can do it in July. Yes, I can.
Okay.
We'll make it in
Okay.
July. No problem.
So from
cancel
our standpoint,
12th.
we're considering that the June 12th meeting will be canceled.
Yes, and then we'll come back. One was the Marsh Run, but there was another project we were talking about today that needed to go. So July 17th will work.
Okay. With that, I think we're adjourned, and hopefully see everybody tomorrow night at the All Commissions and dinner. Thank you.